Whoa! You need a party closer? This is it. So thank you everyone for being here at the end of the day, also a long day on your weekend, so I really appreciate that. For those of you that I didn't get to introduce myself to, my name is Acacia Thornton, and today we are talking revenue rise. Now, as mentioned to some of you, today's topic was designed expecting to have more techies in the room. But everything we're going to talk about is business, and that applies to every business. So I'll try to maybe change some of my stories up a little bit on the spot to speak to what I've spoken to some of you about. If you have any questions about how to apply it to your particular business model after, come talk to me and we'll make it happen. Throughout this, I've built in questions. And these questions are to help us brainstorm. You could internalize them, write them down, or we might talk a little openly depending about the time we have, always on your comfort level. But do know that at the end I have a QR code where you can download all these slides that have the questions. So you don't have to take copious notes or do anything like that as we go about. All right. Without further ado, let's rise that revenue. Have any of you been to a garage sale? Ever hosted a garage sale? All of you, right? It's pretty normal in today's day of what we do with that. So when you have a garage sale, what are you doing? You're taking things you've purchased, things that have been gifted to you, things that you've acquired over the years, and you're selling them. And you get to make whatever money you can off of it. Let's use a book, for example. You bought a book, you read the book, maybe, and you're going to sell the book now. Now, a book is a copyrighted material, just like a lot of technology is. It's protected under IP law. But you get to sell the book, and you get to keep the money. Maybe it's 50 cents, but maybe that book has increased in value over the years and might go to the Antique Roadshow and be worth 50 million. When you sell that book at your garage sale, do you give any of that money back to the author or the publisher? No. Why? Why can we do that with a copyrighted work? It's protected, we all know that, but somehow I have a copy and I can sell it. Now, if we were to take that book and put it online in e-form, and I download it in PDF, can I do the same thing? Can I sell the book for 50 cents or the millions of dollars it might be worth? What's the difference? What's the difference in physically selling the book versus the e-version? Does anyone want to take a guess? More accessible. Okay. When you say accessible, do you mean like it's easier to buy a physical book or easier to? Easier to buy it online. Okay, so because it's easier to buy online, it's harder. There's less demand for it on the other end. Okay. Yeah.
The physical book, you're transferring ownership from one-to-one. If you create a PDF of it and sell online, that's actually like mass distribution.
It
one-to-many.
Can be mass distribution, right? When we had the original idea of the printing press coming out, that was the original one-to-many. But you're right, with stuff, it becomes easier to disseminate, easier to make the copies. But that ease does not give me the right to sell them. The answer is it has to do with the terms of the transaction when you purchased it. The terms of the transaction dictate what you as a consumer get to do next. Because in a standard sale, the buyer gets everything. In a license, they only get what is granted to them. Under the law, when you buy something, it is a sale. You have purchased it. You own it. When you license something, ownership retains to the owner, the creator. A license is kind of like a rental agreement. It gives you permission to use, access, or whatever based on the terms of the transaction. And this matters because if you don't set those ground rules at the time of the transaction, the default under law is you've given them up. You have sold that. You sold your intellectual property. You sold your idea. You sold your software. You sold your bookkeeping. you sold it. If you created marketing materials using your things, you've sold them, which means the customer can resell them. The customer can reuse them however they want. There were no boundaries set unless you set them first. And so this becomes really important because if your terms don't explicitly carve out those things, you lose control, including of your IP. And this can be really bad for your business because the future value belongs to the customer, not you. You don't control where your product ends up. It can go to your competitors. It can go to somebody who wants to compete. It can create a competitor. Customers can underprice you. You're selling the exact same thing, right? If you sell the PDF and they sell the PDF, well, it didn't cost them anything to create it the way it cost you something. Your IP depreciates because now it can be out there for anybody, accessible without any terms or boundaries. And you have to repeatedly hustle for new sales or new ideas, new products. So the idea of this license versus ownership is very important whenever we put a work of ours out into the world, and it doesn't matter what format that's in. Here's how Slim Shady does it. So when record deals originally came out, I'm sure we all remember vinyl and CDs and cassettes and the old school ways of having a tangible copy. Just like you did with the book at the garage sale, I could take my CD, I can give it away, I could sell it. And the record deals with the artists had that thought in mind because that's how things were done. That's what a sale was. You buy the album, a percentage of that royalty goes to the artist. And for a lot of record deals, particularly Eminem's, that was around 10%. Don't quote me on that number for him, but that's about what it was. But if your work, your song, maybe made its way into a movie or a commercial, that was a license. You weren't selling a copy of it, you were licensing it for use. Certainly the artist would be given more like 50% of that, which is huge, percentage-wise. And so Eminem sued the record companies when it came time for Apple Music to come on the scene. Eminem said, hey, they might be buying my album, but it's not a sale anymore. It's a license. And my record deal with you says I get 50% for that, not 10%. And the record companies were like, no, it's still an album, it's still a song, it's the same situation. Sale versus license, 10% versus 50%. And what ended up happening is that pricing is often one of the smallest parts of the sales agreement because it holds the least amount of depth of opportunity. Eminem won the lawsuit that every single one of his album and song sales on Apple Music were worth 50% to him. Why? Because it didn't come down to the price. It came down to the terms of what was in those agreements. The term of the agreement he had with the record label, the term of the agreement that the record label had with Apple Music, and the terms that Apple Music had with its customers. Everything used the word license. Everything had scopes of use, everything you would see in a license. And the record labels didn't come along and just going to say, well, it was the same thing, because it wasn't. Eminem won that lawsuit and got millions more out of his record companies, and I've never seen an industry's lawyers scramble faster to update their contracts in my life. Every single artist had to go back and they had to fix that. And so what this means for us in business is that if you're relying solely on price to generate the revenue in the transaction, you are missing a majority of your opportunity for growth. It is not price that determines your opportunity to scale or what comes next for you and your customer. It's the rest of the terms of the transaction. And that's where we're going to go today. So, my name is Acacia Thornton. I'm an award-winning attorney, primarily in the tech and IP space. But before any of that, I'm the daughter of a successful entrepreneur. I'm a business owner myself. I studied business. I consulted small businesses. And then I went on to be a lawyer. So I understood the revenue and business leadership first. I do not believe the law is a reason to stop business. I believe it's a reason to support your business. So I always come from a business first perspective. I'm a big believer that contracts aren't legal documents. They're business documents that happen to be legally binding. You don't file them with the government. You're rarely ever going to go to court over them. It's more about your business relationship. So that's what we're going to look at with today's talk. All right. Just to clear the air here, what is a licensing agreement? All right. A licensing agreement is a document. It's part of your customer agreement. Might be your customer purchase of sale, right? You can call it different things, but it outlines the terms of the transaction that grant permission to use your product without giving away the ownership of it. It's what prevents it from being a literal sale. And it creates the specific boundaries of the do's and the don'ts, and it helps you transform a one-time sale into a multi-dimensional asset. So, what are some of the ways that we can utilize those other terms to help you increase your revenue? And that's what we're going to go today. We're going to go through at least 4, possibly 5, depending on time. Like I said, at each end of these, I have some brainstorming questions so that we can either talk about or you can take them home with you, whatever you prefer, but to help you get to the next step in your business and apply this. Happily ever after the sale. Okay, so you've made the sale. Awesome. It is not easy to acquire a new customer. In fact, it's one of the most expensive things that there is. But what I see a lot in documents whenever I'm looking at I've done a lot of due diligence for mergers and acquisitions. Whenever a company is coming in to invest or purchase, acquire you, merge with you, take some of your assets, they're going to look at your contracts. Because your contracts are where the terms actually exist, on what rights and obligations everybody has. And when I did that in one of my recent analysis, I discovered that this company had a great product and they were making a lot of money. But in that, they're like, okay, here, it's yours. It's licensed. You don't own it. That's it. They let the relationship be done. And done equals dead. Because if you don't know what's coming next for your customer can't either. You don't know where you're taking them. What was the point of earning their trust? And one of the key things here is that if your customers can keep the product, they won't buy it again. And that was something that I saw a lot. Because even though they can't own it, they can still access it and use it. If you have a Netflix subscription or something like that, and you stopped paying, if Netflix didn't cut off your access, would you still go sneak in there and see what you could watch, check it out, browse what's in there? We all would. Okay, we all would. We'd all do it. Let's just be honest. But that's the key. If your customer gets to keep the product at the end, you just leaked revenue right there. Even if they don't want the full value, it doesn't mean they're not going to get any value. Now, why does this matter? Is that when you hand your product to the customer, you're not in the loop about what they're doing next. And you don't get the added payment for those extended benefits. I want to change up what I wrote here. Because when you acquire the customer, it's not enough to just give them the product, have good, happy customer satisfaction, customer service, and then let it go. You want to maximize what comes next. And we call this the second sale. A second sale is, do I have a slide on this? Oh, I didn't give you guys a slide on this. This is my bad. All right, does everybody know what a second sale is with a customer?
Are you talking about like upsell opportunities?
I love that question right there. So an upsell is the next level of benefit. A second sale is a separate transaction. An example would be iPhones. When they first came out, we had like, what, 1 or 2 colors we could choose from? And they're like, now we have it in pink and blue and green and all these other colors. I still only needed one iPhone at a time. A second sale is something that could be added on separately. It stands on its own independently. And what it does is it leverages the trust you already have with your clients. You spent a lot of time building their trust to get that sale. Don't let it die. Know what's coming next. Because it starts to shift your business from a customer acquisition machine into a lifetime value engine. Customer lifetime value is a much bigger thing in the market now, and you've probably heard of it. But what we want to do is sometimes it's okay to spend more acquiring the customer for the first sale, because we know over the lifetime of their trust and relationship with us, we're going to get more out of them. So it's very important that you monetize the work you've done. Don't let it die. I used to sell legal technologies to law firms. And I once had this firm I was trying to get into. They were an IP firm. So they did a lot of patent filing and copyright filing with the USPTO for their clients. And one of the features of the program I had was that, hey, I can get you up to speed in areas of law you don't know that well, but can increase your revenue. You can get a second sale very easily without having, go do all the legal research, restudy, all that thing. And they're like, we don't need that. We focus on patents. Like, I get that. What happens when your customer is done with the patent? They've come to you, they filed it, they got it. They're not going to sit at home just being like, ooh, I got my patent. What's the next step for their customer? And they were like, well, they often want to make money from that, get investors, build a business, license it. It's like, do you help them with that? No. What do you do with them? Oh, we send them somewhere else. They can go get that service somewhere else. So you already know what comes next for your clients. And you're not only letting them walk out the door, you're telling them to. Because now if that other firm that does more for them than one thing starts to enter your zone, do you think that client's going to come back to you? No. You already knew what was next. Because if you don't solve the next problem for your customer, they'll go find that answer somewhere else. And if you don't take them on the customer journey to the next destination, somebody else will. You've set them up for something. By buying your product, licensing it, whichever it is, you set them up to solve one problem and you already know what comes next. You probably intuitively do because you know your customer. And if you know your customer through conversations, you might actually know what it is. So the idea of the second sale is not letting the relationship die because you've closed the transaction. Set them up to take them down the path to what's next. Even if you can't be the one to offer them what's next, create the relationship. Introduce them. Get a commission. Get a referral. Create the partnerships. That way you become more valuable and build increased trust with your clients without having to acquire another client. The money is right there on the table in what comes next. And then as you grow, the goal is to bring that in-house. Make it yours. Acquire the company that you're in partnership with or so on. So then all of that revenue becomes yours. Start small, grow big. And so to kind of help us digest this, once your product solves the problem for your customer, what is the next thing that your customer needs to face? What is their next challenge? Just like the IP firm, once the patent is filed, that client, they need to do something with that patent. It doesn't just go in the office or go on the wall. What is next for your customer? Does everybody kind of have an idea of directions? It might be more than one answer. Good, okay. Nice. All right, so that kind of resolves our first look at the second sale. That is one of the easiest and lowest margin things that we could do to increase more revenue. And like I said, it doesn't even have to be something you do yourself. It can merely be an introduction that you make. The other thing you can do with that is you can also use your customer to be the one to get you the next sale. I had somebody on one of my seminars come in and he did CPR trainings, and he would get companies to sign on for CPR training through HR. And he's like, well, I don't know how to get a second sale out of them. They only need this like once a year. That's kind of it. I can maybe get a 3 to 5 year contract, but there's nothing else. And I was like, well, what if they got a discount of 10% to give you a referral? If they give you 3 referrals within a week of your training, they get 10% off. Suddenly your 10% discount can lead to 3 more sales. So you can also leverage the customer themselves to help you set up the next sale. Even though it may not be a sale directly to that customer, they can be part of the journey. It also builds further relationship with you. You now have more reasons to touch up with your customer. Hey, just talked to referral 3. Things went great. Hello, welcome. All right, any questions on that? No. Did everybody learn something? Actually, I have most of you shaking yes. Got a couple of you no. Okay. I have people I have to impress still. All right, this one does apply a little bit more towards the licensing, but it can apply to a lot of your other businesses as well. So as your customer buys your product, it's not the only thing they're going to do with it. When a customer comes to you, they've come to you with a problem. They have chosen your services, your product, your offering as their solution. But as they start to build a relationship with your product and with your company, they're going to expand their uses. And this matters because the price paid at the beginning by your customer is based on what they perceive the initial value to be, not the long-term uses of your product. So if you fail to monetize that value over time, you only get the first opportunity to monetize. You don't get the ongoing ones. You miss out on future value revenue over the lifetime of the uses. And this is one of the big ones right here. Are you giving your clients a reason to follow up with you 6 months after your services? Or are you the one chasing them? I'll give you an example. I used to work for big data, Fortune 500 big data. And they had the consulting branch. They had the we make your dashboards and your software as a service branch. We had the API branch. But it didn't really cost us much to also give you just the pieces of the data in case you want to do something in-house. So we had a branch that would like $5,000 a quarter. I'll give you the data set. You can make your own dashboard, predict your own sales, look at your own transactions, and do this yourself. And so we had a client who did that. $5,000 a quarter, they got their little data set. Here you go. Well, as they began to use that data set and create their dashboards for sales, they started to realize, hey, now might be a good time to have an IPO. I can see that we're forecasted to do this. The rest of the market is going to happen like that. Now is the time for the big cash in. So they set themselves up. They reach out to financial advisors, the SEC, everybody on board, and they realize the terms of the agreement. They realized they were only allowed to use internal use. That license had been intentionally set up to give them the initial use they came to us for. Internal use for your dashboards. Well, now they wanted to make money with it, have an IPO with it, put it into their investor, like, the pamphlets you got to make and all that stuff to get people on board. Well, they needed our permission for that. We didn't sit there calling them every 6 months. Hey, you guys don't have an IPO yet? Hey, are you going to have an IPO yet? Are you ready for an IPO? Have you thought about having an IPO? That wouldn't make sense from our sales teams to do that. Instead, we let the contract do the work. We knew that some of our customers would go have IPOs, and the terms didn't allow it. So now the phone rings in our direction. Hey, we want to do this with the data. Can we do that? Absolutely. It's $100,000. $5,000 a quarter, exact same data set, already delivered to them. is now $100,000. Why? They're going to make a lot of money off of it. The value to them changed. They're not going to pay $100,000 to look at their little sales, models in their dashboards. But if you go use this exact same data set to have an IPO, suddenly your return is much bigger. That's our data. We've set ourselves up for success. We get this massive sale without even having to pick up the phone. And I remember the sales rep being like, Acacia, come on. They spent $5,000. I couldn't even get them to spend $7,000. They're not going to spend. I'm like, Susan, just go ask. Not even an hour later, she goes, oh my God, they said yes. Because like you said, Paris, they were set to make millions. All the advisors they have to pay and everything to have their IPO, this was a drop in the bucket. So this was a very easy next thing for them. Because as customers increase their trust in your products, they increase their creativity in utilizing it. As they build a relationship and trust with your products, they get more creative about how they want to use it. And so when you set your licensing terms to permit a reasonable scope based on the price you have offered to them, you are triggering them to come back to you with questions and a conversation. You don't have to charge them for the next thing, but you're keeping an open dialogue that goes two ways, not one. You're not chasing them. As they grow and develop and get more creative about what you've given them, they come to you. Now, this might mean in the beginning you have to kind of bespoke your licensing agreements a bit, or the terms of your sales and so on. But what ends up happening over time is you'll start to see patterns, and you just create templates for each of those. Don't redo all the work. But that in the beginning, there is that slight thing there, and then you get to monetize or have the choice of monetization. You capture the future value. Your client didn't to take what they want and make millions off of your work without you. You required them from the very transactional terms to do this with you. And so, what are the primary reasons your customers are buying your products? I always recommend clients do this. Make a list. There's probably 1 to 3 reasons, maybe even 5. This is why they come to us. This is why we sell it. We sell it based on these things. You probably have some dialogue. So I recommend you make that list. And then I want you to start brainstorming from their perspective. What are they going to do next? Some of this you can learn just over time. As you have your customers and your businesses around, you'll start to see these things. What's important, though, is that the terms of your license and the terms of your sales are as such that you're not being reactive. That you don't get the filing on the IPO and be like, WTF, why are they using our name in that? Why is our product out in public like that? You don't want that. You want to make sure you remain in control and knowledgeable so that you're part of the conversation at all times. So I always recommend this to my clients, that you know why they're coming to you, but then put yourself into their shoes as they play around with it. Where's the creative juices going to take them? Because if your product does what it promised to do, they will get creative in ways you don't, because they're likely in a different industry. They see business differently. They have different customers than you. And now you can start to see new markets you can also enter into that maybe hadn't crossed your mind. And then last but not least, for every one of those uses, assign a monetary value from the customer's perspective. $5,000 a quarter made sense for sales dashboards. $100,000 makes sense if you want to use our name and our data in your IPO offering. The product was the exact same and didn't even have to be delivered again. All I had to do was write an addendum of 2 sentences to that agreement for $100,000. Do you have any questions about that? No? Am I breaking these down easy enough to kind of follow? Cool, awesome. All right, that's always my biggest fear as the lawyer. Okay. Business, it's alive. I've been really liking the new it's not new. I've been playing the Frankenstein slot machine lately. one thing I see a lot of business owners make the mistake on is that your deal, even though you signed it today, you closed it today, you had the conversations leading up to it, it's not limited in time and space to when you sign the deal. It's also not limited to the relationships you built to close that deal. Why? Because businesses are dynamic, growing things. They're alive. What I've seen happen is a lot of times you build a great relationship with a customer. It might be the owner. It might be one of their leaders, somebody in the C-suite. It might just be, I don't know, a user, an engineer or something. But you build this great relationship, and then you sign the agreement. It's not their name at the top, because you're not in business with the person. It's the legal entity, the business name that's at the top. And this matters for a few reasons. Because business entities are, one, recognized by the government as separate entities. So if something goes wrong, you're not attacking a person, you're attacking a business entity. They have their own taxes, they have their own revenue, everything, right? The business is its own entity. Ooh, this thing keeps moving on me. Okay, let's go. Now, what happens here is the problem is that when we rely on the personal connection that we have made at the business, we overlook what might actually happen with the entity itself. Because the leadership of that business has an obligation, especially if they're a public company, they have an obligation to do what's best for the business, even if that means doing something that is in alignment to your business and your product. And what determines that is the terms of those agreements you've signed with them. Because businesses have a life of their own. One of my first in-house roles, when I finally returned from other legal practice, I went back inside to work inside technology companies again. And one of them had a customer they had been working with for years. They just signed a new contract with them. I think it was about a 5-year contract. A year into the contract, that customer got a new CFO, a chief financial officer. A good CFO is going to come in and look for cost savings. They're going to come in and see what contracts are duplicative. What can we do to clean the books up? And that's what they did. He came in and he did a great job. In fact, he found out they were double paying for certain things. And when he went to the internal business people, they're like, yeah, that's because when we had our conversations with my client, we told him we were going to use it for this. And the CFO goes, that's cool, that's what the conversation was. But the document says we have a wider scope of use. We have wider permissions. And these permissions overlap with some of the other contracts we're paying for. So how about we cancel these other contracts, save the money, and just put all those uses right here? It's brilliant. That's what a good CFO does. Problem. My client, the supplier in that, wasn't prepared for that. In fact, it turns out that because of those added uses, that customer was now cannibalizing what was about to be their entry into the market for a new product. The value that their customer had, plus our product, exceeded what my client could do with their product, plus the added benefits. So they come running to the legal team. We need to cancel this contract now. I know we're only a year into these 5 years, but we got to get them out of the market. That's our market. We've worked hard for research and development. We're ready to go out there. They can't steal it from us. And I look at the contract and I'm like, actually, you gave them permission to. You didn't mean to. You didn't explicitly say you may put our product into your product and resell it, but the rest of the terms on that agreement said that they could. And okay, so my client was like, fine, if I can't stop it, can I at least charge them more? No, you didn't build that in there either. You were so eager for the sale with your customer. You forgot to look at what was going to happen on their end. You forgot to look how your customers are going to grow, how your customers are going to change over time, and how it's not the person you were talking to, it's the entity and its leadership that are going to make decisions. I ended up leaving that company before I saw everything through, but I do know that their rollout into market was delayed at least 2 years over this. They were unable to get out of that contract and had to finish the other 4 years. Massive business mistake that wasn't intended. Nobody did it intentionally. Both sides did what was right for their business at the time, or what they thought was, not realizing they were cannibalizing their next opportunity. So what are some of those common business pivots? There's loads of them, but I thought we'll go through 3 of them today. Expanded use. That is when the customer gets creative in how they want to use your product. We've touched on that a little bit. But this may mean a new business line for them, a new division for them. And that could mean new users as well. And it may mean that they are able to expand what they're already doing. Let's say you have a team, even the people that already have access, what if their job descriptions expand? They already have access to your stuff. We talk about how the customers love to get creative once they have your stuff. Those exact people might get creative, or the business itself does. And that could impact what happens on your resources, like your servers. Suddenly there's 10 times as many pings coming through. Suddenly your bandwidth can't handle it. So why did your site crash suddenly? How are there a million more users on there or transactions a day than there were yesterday? We didn't sell more, but your customers might be doing more. The next common way is they start integrating your offerings into theirs. This might be implicit, it might be explicit. They start using your stuff to support their customers, either behind the scenes or directly into their product offerings. Now you're suddenly serving your client plus all of theirs. Are you getting paid for that? Do they have to come back and tell you? The terms of your agreement determine whether or not they are permitted to do this, because they are a living, breathing thing, and they're going to use the resources they have available to them as any reasonable business or person would. Mergers and acquisitions. Mergers and acquisitions. Suddenly what was a 20-person company becomes a 400-person company. Your users, I don't even know what that math is right there, overnight. What if they were acquired by one of your competitors? Suddenly your product, access to, and everything is in the hand of your competitor. We want to start looking at what is next for the customers, not just with our product, but as a business, as an industry. Where is their industry going, and keeping tabs on that, because it might start to influence your revenue opportunities, but also start hitting you with costs that you didn't see coming. Because what happens next for your customers happens next for your product, whether you see it coming or not. So some of our questions are, if your customers began expanding their uses of your product, how would that impact your business? Think of your top 1 or 2 clients right now. If they started doing just little extras, things that seem absolutely harmless to them, what is the impact on your business? If your customers began integrating your product, services, even the outcome. Maybe you have something that runs a report. They take that report and then they put that report into their products. So it's not always your actual product, it might be the derivatives of it. If they start doing that with their products and offerings, how is that impacting your business? How do their customers access? How does your competitors' access suddenly change as well? And of course, if your customers were to be acquired, or the people you're talking to are no longer the people who are making the decisions, are your agreements set up to keep your revenue and your business in alignment to growth? I could sit there and do the lawyer thing, say, are you protected? But this is about growth. Can we leverage this the way we want it to? Where does the leverage tip? Do you have any questions about that? No? Awesome. Okay. So this next one is one that I wasn't sure we were going to get to or not. But this is where we really start to sort of quadruple and 10 times our revenue. Customers versus resellers. They're not the same. And this might be the number one mistake I see young businesses make. When a customer comes along, they are excited to be like, yes, how many transactions do you need? Go to your customers. You're going to give it to them. That's okay. Cool. What do you need? 500 transactions a month. We got that. Here's the price for that. And we treat that like it's a customer relationship. They're not a customer. The end user is your customer. The end user is your customer, which means it doesn't go any further. If you're in a B2B situation, is the business you're selling to, are they integrating your stuff into their products or services directly or indirectly? If the answer to that is yes, they're not your customer. Back to the idea of, are they using the data set to make an internal model? That's an idea of them being your customer. Now they want to have the IPO. The people who benefit from your data being used after your customer uses it is somebody else. It's the government. It's the potential investors. There's a third party that is now starting to benefit, which means you're no longer in a customer transaction anymore. And it might be both. Sometimes they might be a customer and that's okay too. But what we want to do is we want to be mindful of that. And we want to be mindful of it for a few reasons. So now that we've talked about the difference between a customer and a reseller, is that when we have these layers, your customer, we're going to call them a reseller now, that reseller gets value from you. But then they get another layer of value. The value they get to deliver to their customers. And then their customers get value as well. You can see how suddenly the one single price to your stuff is no longer what's actually happening. It doesn't represent the true dilution, accessibility, or distribution of your product or services. So we want to be mindful that when we start to see that it's not the actual end user there, there's opportunity. There's opportunity for leverage. And this is where we start to get into the idea of a reseller versus a value-added reseller. I think value-added reseller is something majority of small and medium-sized business owners have never heard of. But a majority of the time, it's what you're dealing with. So a reseller is Best Buy. They get all this stuff from Apple, from Microsoft, from Insignia, like all the different brands, right? And then Best Buy adds a margin and sells it. They're a reseller. Best Buy isn't really adding anything to the transaction other than making it easier for you to purchase it as the consumer, as the actual end user. That is a reseller. Another reseller is like an air conditioning repair. What they sell is repair services, but as an add-on or an enhancement, they also sell the air conditioning units themselves. But they don't do anything to the air conditioning unit. They don't make that a bigger, better one or do something with it. It's an added product. So you're reselling the equipment that's already there. So that's what a reseller is. A value-added reseller is somebody who takes your stuff, directly or indirectly, like the derivatives, adds value to it, and then resells it. And your name may or may not be as part of that transaction with their customers, depending on how behind the scenes you are and what type of white labeling opportunities you get there. But that's the difference, is does your customer add or enhance anything? So when we go back to the Best Buy situation, I still know what came from Apple. When I go to the air conditioner situation, I know where the air conditioner unit came from. That's still a one-to-one transaction. Value-added resellers are different. An example would be, okay, Intel inside, but it's actually Microsoft who creates the laptop, or Dell who creates the laptop. You're buying the laptop, there's these components inside that you as a user aren't familiar with where they're coming from. Maybe you are, but maybe you're not. It's not really poignant to the transaction. Another one is Amazon. When I worked for Big Data, Amazon came along and was like, hey, and you all notice if you've ever bought a car part, got to buy a battery or a windshield wiper. You're like, what fits my car? You don't go do all that research. You go up, there's a system that says, put in your VIN, put in your make, your model, your year. Ta-da! Well, that's a back-end system. Amazon didn't create that. AutoZone didn't create that. That's a third-party integration. But it's seamless to where when you go to Amazon and do that, you think it's Amazon. That is a type of value-added reseller. This matters because when we stop looking at those value-added resellers as a customer and start seeing them as a distribution channel, we can start to add additional layers of revenue. And we see this with Amazon. Amazon might buy your product if you sell a physical product. But who owns the customer? Who has the relationship with the customer? Amazon, not you. You didn't get that dynamic, which means the terms of your product going out to the market are on Amazon's terms, not yours. You also lose the value of knowing who your customer is. You lose the value of having that relationship because Amazon has it. So what you want to do is when you have these type of agreements is you want to monetize that. That has a price to you, a cost to you. Yes, you might get more sales, but at a cost. So you want to start not treating them like a customer. It's no longer that one-to-one. There's a different dynamic that comes into play and comes into the monetization. Amazon, as your distributor, gets to charge you. They make money off of your product. And then they make money off of the transaction of the customer buying your product. They could double the value. Do you? No. Because Amazon is the one, as the value-added reseller, who gets all of that. Which means without you, depending, Amazon is very different, but depending on the type of value-added reseller you are working with, what is the benefit of working with you versus not working with you? Do they have other options? If not, you have more leverage. Utilize it to get your name out there, to get those customer informations, create the relationships, or charge more for them. Don't let it be a one-to-one. And the other thing is, as we saw with the CFO agreement situation earlier, once your reseller has your information, your product, and they have permission to use it, they can come in and undercut you. Amazon does this a lot. This is where Amazon Basics came from. They had all the data, not the product creators. Amazon has the data. Your value-added resellers have the data. They know what's happening in their market. They know what's happening in their niches, in their industry, because they have all of that. But it also means there's opportunity here. Because instead of getting your hands into one customer at a time and doing every one of these acquisitions yourself, you can leverage the value-added reseller. You get more transactions. So the key is making sure that we're getting the monetary value for every single layer. And I say every layer because sometimes your value-added reseller doesn't sell to the end user. They sell to another value-added reseller. That might go pretty far. It might mean your product is suddenly in millions of hands while you think you have a customer list of 500. It also means those millions of customers are not going to come buy from you because if they already have your functionality and your features and your benefits through somebody else, why would they come buy it from you? We talked about that a little bit with the idea of the second sale. If they can get this elsewhere, if they can get their patents from somebody else who's also going to help them build a business, why would they come back to you, Patent Fern? It's the same here. So seeing these layers, there's no one clear-cut answer to this as a business owner, but it is a layering of opportunity, risk, and most importantly, monetary value that a lot of business owners in the small to medium space overlook the opportunity there. If you don't have any value-added resellers, it is also a great way to increase your revenue pretty quickly. Somebody out there already has the customers you want. Building the right type of relationship with them can be a win-win for you both. Amazon only wins if there's people actually selling their products there. Amazon needs that. Your value-added resellers need you too, or one of your competitors. But depending on how unique your offerings are, you might be able to leverage that to create more partnerships that expand exponentially your reach into the market. And as discussed, if you can leverage the type of information and feedback you're getting, make sure you have royalty structures along the way or escalator clauses, different pricing points for each of those layers, you suddenly go from a one-to-one to a one-to-many. And that one-to-many might even go into more manys, and so on. So the key is to make sure you're being aware of what dilution is happening in the market, who your customers actually are. A reseller, a value-added reseller is not a customer because they're not the end user. You want to be mindful of where everything's going so that you can make better business and leadership decisions for yourself and your business, but also leverage them when you get the opportunity to. So our question for this one is, do you have any customers that utilize your product in their product? Like I said, it might be front and center. It might be behind the scenes. They create something with yours and then they put it into theirs. If the answer to that is yes, what can you do to increase your revenue based on their success? Instead of giving them 2 bites at the apple, make sure you're getting your portion. Yes, they're adding value. Yes, they're the ones in the market. Yes, they're the one doing the sales. Yes, they're the ones with those relationships. But that doesn't mean you get to be cut out entirely. So leveraging the type of deals and terms of the agreements that help you monetize the way that is important for you. Oops. And if you don't have those yet, if you haven't thought that way about your business, it is a great way to scale fast with little to no investment or upfront work. And something that a lot of small and medium businesses don't understand yet is that when it comes time to having your own merger, your own acquisition, when you have these types of relationships where you're already in the vertical, sharing customers, these are the easiest deals to close. You can suddenly become double the business overnight, shifting the whole vertical, taking those customers into your own, and now you not only have the data you leveraged from your agreement, you have whatever they've leveraged in theirs. This is one of the fastest ways to scale your business and grow. When you hit kind of that medium and you verified everything, these types of, you'll see the vertical collapse. You start working with your suppliers and your customers, you start collapsing that accordion to where it's all in one place, and suddenly all of that profit margin is yours, not just the parts you negotiated. All right, any questions on that? Yeah.
A little bit. So, like, going back to your example for the patent, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the patent office is doing their thing to that entity, and they got their competitor that is maybe going to be doing theirs and more, right? If they don't necessarily, like, if they stay in their little lane, they're going to be eventually they're not going to have the moat, right? But at the same time, you know, we've seen companies like Albertsons and stuff. Sometimes they get into a whole bunch of businesses they shouldn't get into. And how do you know when it's good to stay in your lane and good to expand and bite off more than you versus?
That's a great question. It is true that when we stay sort of siloed, we can specialize more. And sometimes that specialization is your unique selling point in the market. In which case, why would you get rid of it? If that's what's bringing you in the money, don't lose it. Don't become like everybody else. Don't water it down. But then, if the market starts to become saturated and you're losing that, now we want to shift our business strategy. There's no right answer based on where you are, other than where you are in the business and where the market is, but the more data you can have, which is one of the reasons sometimes value-added resellers can be great, is you can get some of that info. We've already talked about sometimes we love it when our customers have to come to us. Right, the IPO use, you don't have to keep tabs and track down what's going on in the market. They're already telling you. So it's more about the information and timing based on market conditions, supply, demand, and so on. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So it's not like there's always one right answer. It comes down to those other things. Just like with the IPO company, they had no intentions of having an IPO. Then they see the data and they're like, oh, maybe now's the time to have the IPO because we're not going to get that in 5-10 years. So it comes down to the information you have, and you just make the best business decision that you can. Yeah. Any other questions? No? Okay. So, the whole point of all of this was that you don't want to be running a garage sale business. You don't want your products, your services, even if it's IP or not. You don't want somebody else dictating the value, the price, the depreciation, the accessibility of it. We've talked about how easy it is to copy ebooks and things in e-form. And we've talked about how you lose the opportunity to get good pricing when accessibility is very easy. You keep tabs on it through the terms of your agreements. Failure to do that leads to the default, which is not only a transfer of the product, it's the transfer of the ownership. And that means the decisions, including pricing. So just to kind of recap a little bit, we talked about how before you were going to do sales. Majority of the time, if you can help it, there's no more selling your stuff. We're now going to license it. For those of you taking pictures, I'll give you you can download all of these. I'll give you the little, you can download everything. Because as we saw, license keeps you in control, keeps you in the ownership, the driver's seat, and it helps you leverage what information, pricing, scaling, and marketability that you need. We've also talked about, like a TR situation, that we no longer want to do things in a single transaction. I made a sale today, yes! Great customer service, they're happy, I'm done. No more of that. You worked hard to acquire that client. You probably spent a lot of money and a lot of time to get there. So let's envision what comes next for them. If you can do it in-house, awesome. If you can't, who can you bring in to help make sure you're a partner to your customers? Because you've built that trust, and we don't want it to just be one and done. Next, we no longer talk about price in the one-to-one either. There's a lot of leverage on a document. If you look at a contract, price is one line. It's one sentence on there. Maybe two. You have all those other words. And as a lawyer, I can tell you they're not there for legal reasons. They're there to help your business transaction, which means you have a lot of space to play with the scope. Scope of use, scope of time, scope of geography, scope of whether or not they can share it internally, externally. In fact, since I have a small enough group, I'm thinking about doing one of my future talks called Lush Licensing, where we deep dive into the 11 key areas of licensing. Is that something you guys would be interested in? Yeah, okay. So I know not all of you have licensing businesses, so I wasn't sure. Okay, I'll look that. I call it Lush Licensing. So if you see that on the agenda in the coming months, that's what that is. All right, we've also talked about we no longer want just customers. We want distribution channels. And we want to know how we leverage those distribution channels for data, for marketability, for market share, and for monetary purposes, but also for when it comes time to merge or acquire your company later. That's where you're going to get a lot of it. We also have learned that we don't timestamp our transactions. It's not one and done. It's not what we agreed to today is all that's going to happen, especially if your agreements are more than a day old, right? If they have a year-long agreement, a 6-year agreement, a 3-year, as we saw, businesses are supposed to change. They're supposed to pivot, they grow. They're supposed to respond to their customers in the market and technology and advancement. They're supposed to do this. But when we sell to them or we create a license, we forget that. So setting ourselves up so we have the success, but also the leverage to get your money if and when it comes up, impacting your products and services. Because when you set the terms of your transactions, you set the terms of your revenue future. And there's a QR code for any of you who want to download everything. Do know that it's not going to send it to you right away. I changed the slides today, so I'll go put the new ones in there. You'll probably get it tomorrow in your inbox. Are there any questions? Anybody want to brainstorm aloud?
case than anticipated.
Yes.
And so when you're drafting a document or when you're putting an agreement in place, how do you kind of expect the unexpected?
Great question. What I like to do is decide what it is you do want and put a guardrail around everything else.
Okay.
Because
So
back
you
back
speak specifically to what you are trying to get out and say, this is what's going to happen and nothing else is going to happen.
yeah, so usually when I write an agreement, I'll do one of two things. I will say you can have everything, but not this. Or I will say you can have nothing except this.
Okay.
And obviously the latter one is the one that's got the tighter ring fence. And it's not about we're not trying to control the customer. Or like I said, with the data one, I'll use that one because their standard paperwork was internal use. There's a lot of things a client can do internally with the data set. But the second the derivatives or the data set itself needed to go externally, that's where that business cared. So they were risking a little bit of what could happen internally, but they were also putting some of the other things that I'll talk about in my licensing. But like, you could say, hey, I don't care what you use it for, as long as it's in the marketing division. Your financial division can't use this. Or I don't care what you use it for, so long as it's only happening in the United States. Your European division can't do it. So we put the other types of guardrails, not just the use cases, to sort of limit. We give the customer a little bit of breathing space. They don't feel confined, but you know what you're trying to accomplish. Make sure that the language speaks to that, and give the client a reason to come ask you and have a conversation with you, should they want anything else. Yeah, because the goal is not to have them feel pressured. I don't believe in contracts being like, I'm going to sue you. Like, you're not going to stay in business long if that's what you do. But we do want to entice them to have an open dialogue about what's happening with your product and services. Yeah, that's usually how I do it, is one of those two ways. Yeah. Any other questions? There's only two of you. In fact, one of you left. So no two of you have the same business model that I'm aware of. Paris, do you have a question? Is that what you're? No. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you all for your time. I hope you found this useful. This is my first Tech Alley talk, so I had to kind of pick the topic in the dark. So any feedback would be greatly appreciated. But I love you all for giving me your Saturday afternoon. Thank you.